So you've written an amazing Call of Cthulhu adventure and want to publish it as part of the Miskatonic repository, but you have to get those words into a PDF for people to actually play. You know that games with high production values sell more copies, but how can you get those without spending too much money on graphic design services? Or you might have a little bit of design experience, but you want to make your work look as professional as possible, with the potential to take the game to print. I've previously worked as a graphic designer and have published my game, The Hammersmith Haunting, in both print and PDF format. So while I've worked primarily in digital design, I had a lot to learn when I made this game in preparing my document for print. After that experience, I thought I'd take you through how to design your Call of Cthulhu adventure in InDesign. The first thing to do for me was to look at Chaosium's Call of Cthulhu books. You want to really understand Chaosium's in-house style. If you want your game to look professional, then you have to look at what the professionals do. This seems really obvious, and of course this is just a great excuse to pore over your nice hardcover books. I spent a lot of time examining Chaosium's designs for their page layout, which is 2 columns of text with breakout boxes. Paragraph alignment, it's a full alignment, so it goes from side to side on the column. The illustration style varies across books, but it is often watercolor or hand illustration style, and they're always professionally done. The backgrounds are made to look like paper books with a finial across the top and the bottom. That's just a fancy word for the decoration. For the fonts, the headings are in 1920s period fonts, but paragraphs are in easy to read serif fonts. And serif fonts are the ones with the little sticks on the end of letters. Covers are professionally illustrated with a contrasting text. And I mean, the classic Keeper rulebook is one of my favorites and was the inspiration for the color scheme for my own game. There are templates for InDesign available for your Cthulhu game, but I found it easier to set up my own. When I downloaded the provided InDesign files, they weren't actually compatible with the most recent version of InDesign. Now, my first tip after you've done having a look at all your lovely books is to design for print from the start. While you might only ever export a digital version for sale on Miskatonic repository, it is so much easier to export a digital file from something designed from print than to work backwards and find you have to redesign half your file because your fancy map goes over the margins and your beautiful illustrations are only web resolution. The next step is actually one that's a little bit crafty. It's to make a mock-up. These do not have to be fancy mock-ups. I often do this with a pen and paper or post-it notes. You need to just jot down the key page elements you might need, which include your front cover, back cover for print documents only, inside cover again for print documents only, acknowledgement and credits page, the adventure itself, which will span several pages, and you don't need to mock up every single pages, but it's good to know where it goes in the sequence. Then your player handouts, the author and maybe your illustrator biography, character sheets, and as I learned through feedback on my game, the character sheets should be laid out back to back so they can be cut out by keepers and handed to players if needed. The next step is to read the specs. Reading the design specs at the start is kind of like reading the manual for designers. It's not sexy, but it sure is helpful in making sure you set up and export the right file the first time. It's like reading a recipe before starting to cook. There are so many analogies here. If you're designing for Miskatonic repository, it is worthwhile paying attention to the specs provided for digital files online. There are some useful tips for exporting an optimized PDF for digital on the Miskatonic repository full guidelines, and you should definitely read these before you start, noting the credits you need to include on the inside page. There's also a helpful guide online on how to design a document in InDesign, but I will show you how to set up the basics here for your own documents. So I'm taking these specs from DriveThruRPG and the Miskatonic repository page, and I'm going to show you how to set up a basic master page in InDesign with these specifications. I know there's been a lot of before we start. One final note I do have to say, and it's a note on file management. Keeping your files organized is really important with a link-based program like InDesign. If you set it up and move your images around in the folders and then move the files around, your images will unlink and you won't be able to export a high-resolution, sharp PDF document. My hot tip for you is to set up a file structure for your games with individual files for items such as character sheets, your cover, design elements, which is useful for backgrounds and finials, handouts, maps, and all of those things. And these make it much more helpful for you to run your game in the future. So let's pop on over to InDesign finally. Okay, so I'm over here in InDesign, and the quickest way to get going with your Call of Cthulhu game is to hit this button here, letter. That is the correct size for a Call of Cthulhu game. Now, for all you metric users and lovers out there like myself, you will be designing in inches, not centimeters. So keep that in mind as you design. I made a few errors with mine going to print because I was thinking metric, not whatever they use in America. So you've got your document here, and this is your basic page. Some things to get familiar with. If you can't see this kind of side menu here, you really want to go to Window, Workspace, Advanced. Now that sounds scary, but it's actually, I just find the most helpful for design layout. The Pages menu is your friend. So this is where you can see the flow of your pages. You know, that mock-up we just did, that's kind of going to help you see how this should all play out. And you can also just drag and drop new pages in at the drop of a hat. At the moment, I will show you how to check that the page is set up correctly, because there is a correct kind of format for Call of Cthulhu games, and so it's helpful to check the page setup. So the first thing you want to do before you go anywhere, put any text in, go to File, and you go to Document Setup. And this is where you're going to check out just everything is as it should be. So what we do want facing pages, and facing pages means that it lays out like a book. So remember, we're designing with the intention that this will sell lots and lots of copies and you'll go to print on demand. So facing pages allow you to see it laid out like a book, and it's really easy to work backwards from there and export a digital copy that just goes page by page. Keep that checked. You've got your letter size, 8.5 inches by 11 inches. You've got your margins. So margins are really important. If you go to print, you don't want to design all the way up to the side of the page. That will look really weird. So you don't want your text kind of coming up to here and then, you know, whoops, it gets cut off. So we put a margin on here of 0.5 inches, so half an inch, around the border, and that is your limit for where you should be putting important text and pictures. Okay, they should all stay within this border. Now, following that, there's a bleed and slug. You might have to arrow down with here. Don't worry about the slug, but the bleed is important because we're designing for print, right? And the bleed is what basically gives you a bit of breathing room when the printer is cutting the pages out, so that you don't get like white lines all around your page because you've only designed up to the edge. It's basically you design slightly over the edge of the paper so that when it's cut out, it will appear beautifully. So the bleed that we want here is a 0.125 inch bleed. I'm just going to type that in. And because that's all locked together, that will go all the way around. So let's go OK. So you can see that edge is your bleed. So you want to design the backgrounds up to this edge. You want to design the text and all the important stuff to go in this box. All right, the next thing I will show you how to do is actually going on to making your master pages. Making a master page is going to save you so much time in the long run. So these ones are your like everyday pages, and these ones are your master pages up here. So I'm just going to go to this A parent, and you can see that these pages here, they've got the little A there, and they've got the A parent master page applied. So with your A parent, this is where you put, say, your page background, the stuff that doesn't change from page to page, and you kind of want to lock off before you start designing. So your page background, your page numbers, if you want to put a chapter title up the top. Okay, so we're going to grab these pages that I designed for the Hammersmith Haunting, and it's under layout. And I've got a left-hand and a right-hand page. You don't have to do this. I've just made these with some stock imagery. Obviously, I don't recommend you having finials on either side of your page, and I'll tell you why in a second. Let me just place those files. So the issue that I ran into while making the Hammersmith Haunting is that, the top ones are really totally fine, but the side ones actually limit the amount of text I can put in there. So I'm actually going to make these a bit bigger. So we've just got paper, and I'm just going to copy this across, even though that's cheating. Okay, we just want to line that up, and we want to make sure that that goes all the way to the bleed marks. Okay, so we're going to the bleed, the red line. Okay, so just hit save on that. So you want to make sure that your document is saved before you go too far working in it. I'm just going to save this in the Call of Cthulhu test design. Yeah, that's fine. Let's override that. So we've got a pretty little design here. We've got paper. The next thing we want to do is put some page numbers in. Now, I'm going to put them up the top here outside of the margin box. I know you're going like, you just made a big fuss about the margin box. I am popping them there for the time being because I'm doing this for, obviously, it'll be digital first. But the other sneaky thing is that Chaosium also put their page numbers outside the bounding box. So I think it's okay. You will hear about it if you go to print and it's not. So what you need to do is, the first thing you need to do, it's a bit hard to see here, is you actually draw a text box, and it's a text box big enough for your number. So you click inside that text box and you go type, insert special character, markers, and you go current page number. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy and paste that onto this page as well. Okay, and look, you can use, InDesign has some handy guidelines for making sure these things are centered. So I'm going to do that. And you can also just make sure that it's the font you want. You can obviously change these fonts. So I actually got this really cool font for this, which is called Blakely. Blakely, yes, that's right. And it's this kind of 1920s font. And it's pretty cool. Make a good Call of Cthulhu font. So what will happen is if we go back to our pages, there we go. We have 2 and 3. Now these are looking a little small and hard to read in that font. So I might actually go back and make these a bit bigger. Yahoo. So we've got pages 2 and 3. Obviously, you want to make sure that things are easy to read. If this was my game, I probably would maybe consider finding a different font for the numbers, just because I feel like these numbers are maybe a little bit too tight. But for the purposes of this demo, that's perfectly fine. What I'm also going to do is, just because page 1 is the title page, I'm going to chuck in a title there so I know. The other thing I find is that I use, that mock-up we did, I actually block that out on the pages, which is really helpful to remind me what I need to add in. Okay, so I'm just going to chuck in the cover. This is the cover from my game. I designed this myself. So this is a print cover, and I can just pop that over the top of this for the time being. And it's a little bit smaller than the actual page because I did it in metric. Okay, so that is looking really nice. It's already looking like a Call of Cthulhu game. Look at that textured paper. Now, I will talk about this later in the video, but, you can make your own paper textures by scanning in, papers that you've made. You can also license things from online from stock photography agencies as well, or you could just use a plain colored background. There is nothing wrong with keeping it simple. Simplicity is often underrated when you're starting out in design, but one of the biggest things you're aiming for is clarity of reading and clarity of experience. And so there's no use putting all these bells and whistles on this game if it's going to make it harder for the keeper to actually run the game. So the next thing we're going to do before we stick in our text is we're actually going to make sure all our page margins are set up in the parent page. So we go back into that master document. So you just double click on that A parent and you want to select both of them. So you want to make sure they're both highlighted there. And I did that by clicking them each with the shift button held. Okay, so what you want to go to is layout, margins and columns. Okay, so you've got your 5-inch margins. That's all very well and good. You want 2 columns and you want the gutter to be 0.25 inches. Now, I actually went and measured this margin in the Call of Cthulhu Keeper Guidebook. And that's the great thing about design. You can actually just take out a ruler and check what the professional margins are, except when your ruler is in centimeters. So you just press OK. And look, you've got some beautiful columns, and that replicates the style of Chaosium's designs. You can tell actually that that's not centered. So I'm going to center that A there. And I'm just going to double check that that is correct as well. Yeah, that's looking really good. Okay, so save that. Always save as you progress through your document. It's just going to save you heartache later. So I'm going to go back to our page 2. Okay, so we're ready to start laying out our text. Now, the text, you've done it all in Word, I'm assuming. It's really important that you start doing it correctly in Word with headings and paragraph setup, because I will show you in a second why that is important. But you can actually import a Word document straight into InDesign. But the first thing you have to do, and the best thing to do, is to make sure your text is locked off in Word. So that means you've been through the spell check, you've been through an editor if you're going to use one, you've double checked it, you've proofread it, you've done your play testing. Unless you want to inflict permanent insanity on whoever is designing your game, and that's probably you really want to have as much text as you possibly can locked off before you start playing around with the design. And the reason for that is it's okay to do typo checks and, small edits in InDesign, but to do major rewrites and move around chapters and sections in InDesign is not what you want to be doing. It's a real hassle, and then you have to go back and change all those again on your accessible text version. So save yourself the hassle, get as close to done as you possibly can in Word. So I'm going to place the Word file. So you go to File, Place, and you just have to navigate to find your text. So I'm going to go to the accessible text version of the Hammersmith Haunting. And this is all set up with the correct headings. This does take a while, especially if you've got a big file. So go make a cup of tea or something, just to hang out while it's loading. Now I'm going to ignore the columns right now because I'm just going to show you how this looks. So this has already got some paragraphs set up. The font is a little bit smaller here. It's 10 there and 11 there. But you can see that it's got the headings set up here. And this will make it really easy because we're going to go over here to your right to paragraph styles. Now, InDesign have a new feature called style packs, and it is quite helpful if you would like, you're not kind of familiar with laying out in InDesign. The only thing I will say with these is that some of the text options and the color options are not that friendly for accessibility, I don't feel. And also I don't like the look of them, like red and green and blue text. There's too much going on. Sometimes simple is best. Black on light backgrounds, light text on dark backgrounds, just making sure it's easy for people to read. So what I'm going to do is show you how to edit these paragraph styles. So you can see that this one is title style. If you highlight them, acknowledgements is heading +1 or 1+ style. Introduction, 1+, and you'll see as you go along, these are in normal. So normal is actually the paragraph style. So what I'm going to do is I'll start by editing the heading. I'm actually going to just delete the title because that's on the title page, and that's like really obvious if you've bought the game that it's called this. I'd hope you know what it's called. Okay, so from there, we are going to do the heading. So you can edit all of these heading styles to make them things that you really like. So I'm going to right click and go edit heading 1. Okay, so we've got heading 1 and that's fine. You can name it something that is easy for you to understand when you're designing it. Now, this looks like a lot of options. Don't be daunted by it, okay? Really, it's just like word formatting. You go to your basic character formats. Now, I want to use that cool font I found, Blakely. I want to use the bold. And look, I'm going to go for size 18. The leading is 21.6. Okay, so that's the actual space between the lines. Okay, so that looks good to me. You don't need to worry about this stuff down here. You also want to just check your indents and spacing. So there's a bit of space afterwards. You can add a little bit more space, and you can play around with these things so they look good and there's enough space as you're reading it. Your alignment on your headings should be left. That's fine. And then you want to go down to hyphenation. You don't want to hyphenate.
And then you want to look at the character color. So I've got it in word brown right now, but I might want to put it in gray. That's kind of mice, or black. Might put it in black so it's really easy to read. Oh my goodness, look at that. Look at how easy that was and how quickly that changed, right? And that's all because you set it up properly in Word to start with. So I want that to be a bit bigger though, so I'm going to edit heading 1 again, just back into that basic character formats. I think I'll go for about 24. And you notice the leading is updating because it's on auto. Hey, that's looking really good. So I'm going to edit that paragraph style. So I'll edit normal. And what I'm going to do is rename it to paragraph style. And I'll call it paragraph style 1, just to be clear. So you've got your basic character formats. You want Garamond's, or you pick any serif font that's easy to read. There's a big difference between what's known as display fonts, which are the fancy ones you might put your header in, like the acknowledgements and introduction, and then your paragraph fonts, which are designed for legibility. So what you really want to make sure is that it's easy to read. I'm going to put the leading up a little bit just to see how it looks, just so there's a bit more space between the lines. Then I am going to go to hyphenation. No, we don't want hyphenation. Then we go to indents and spacing. So in Chaosium's Call of Cthulhu games, they are full alignment. You want a full justification. So you look at the first line indent and you actually want a slight indent on the first line. And that's part of the readability format. And then you can create a separate paragraph style that doesn't have the indent for your first paragraphs. And I'll show you how to do that in a second. Character color, you just want black. Now what's happened is that it's gone full Batman on this and made the heading ones in the plus style. Somehow that's carried across. So I'm just going to edit that and go back to here. It's very easy fix. You just want to go to your indents and spacing, and you just want to change that to left alignment. Although that kind of looks really noir, like it does look like Batman, the animated series. It's very cool. So we're back here, and it's also borrowed the first line as well. So we'll just go and change that. So the first line indent, we'll just take that off. Okay, we don't want minus indents, okay? Cool. Great, that's fixed. So this is looking very spacey. So we'll just click on paragraph style 1, and that's looking nice. You will probably have to go in manually and delete a couple of little paragraphs breaks there. But what I'm also going to do is actually put this in the column as it ought to be. Oh, that's looking so much better, right? Okay, so some of these lines are looking pretty crunchy. So what you can actually do is just let me get these up. Format in the correct format. So sometimes you're just going to have to highlight and press the paragraph style, but it's going to be a lot easier formatting that because you've already set up your paragraph styles. What I just did there was there's a little plus button. And I'm going to it just keeps following the text as it goes from the Word document. So there's a lot of different styles going on right here, right now. So we just want to highlight the paragraphs with paragraph text and just add in the paragraph style. But the quickest thing you can actually do, it's a cheat. Well, it's not really cheating, it's actually designing, but actually click on these. And there's a cool little trick where you can use the eyedropper tool. Just make sure those boxes aren't selected. So click outside on this gray area. Use this eyedropper tool and you can actually pinch the formatting there and basically highlight bunches of stuff and keep that formatting, right? So you can actually go through. You can see here the lines between are a little bit funky here, so we're going to fix them up. But we can actually just fix that all up using the paragraph styles. So I'm just going to edit heading 1 again. I think it's gone for the indents and spacing, space after. It's probably in basic character. So the leading is 13. I probably made a mistake there. So I don't know why it's going on 11. It should be, say, Let's say 30 point for a 24-point font. Oh, look, that's so much nicer. Okay. Now you can play around with, how you want to fit these in. Obviously, there's a bit of space there between each section, so that's always nice to have a bit of space so the eye can follow. The other thing that you need to do is actually make a second paragraph style. So you duplicate that style. Style first para. And this is the paragraph that does not have the indent on the first line. So the first line should be fully next to the margin, and then the lines after that usually aren't. So that is already looking way more like a game. So you'll need to actually go through and manually just go doink, doink for all the first paragraphs. But it won't actually take you long if you're using the eyedropper tool. And you just click on the grey part to clear it off. Now it looks really nice. The other thing you want to do too, just make sure that you bold your skill rolls. It's just a helpful thing for keepers if they're looking at your game. And there we go. We've already got the game going well. So there's more stuff to format, but I'll leave it there for the paragraph styles. You can also update your headings, the rest of them, put them in the format that you would like. Now, games are always better with some snazzy internal art. And so the first thing I will say, though, it's really important to make sure that your images or fonts are licensed correctly for commercial use. You just can't use any creative stuff you find on the internet, and that includes probably AI images as well. You could license images through a stock photography site or use Creative Commons images from places like Unsplash or Wikimedia Commons, but always check the licensing and credit where necessary. So I even put public domain credits in, even though you don't necessarily have to credit, say, a public domain image from 100 years ago. I always find it helpful and interesting to see where the images have come from. So InDesign is very easy to add images into, but the first thing you want to do is just to check that they're okay for print size, right? You don't want to get to that print. You sell lots of copies of your game, you get to print, and then you're like, hang on, my images are all only screen resolution. Now, what do I mean by that? Print images are 300 dpi or dots per inch, and usually web images are between 72 to 96. And what happens is that if you print a screen image, it might look great on the screen, but because of the quality of the image, it'll print off quite pixelated or a bit blurry, and it won't look as good as it possibly could. So you want to check the image sizes, and for that, you need to go to Photoshop. So this is one of the images I found. It's a public domain image. It's a beautiful etching of the Hammersmith Bridge. And it's one of the images I used in my game, and it's very simple to check what size that image is. So all you need to go up to is this image menu. So open it in Photoshop and then go to the image menu and then go to image size. And I use this shortcut all the time, Alt-Control-I. It's worth knowing because you'll probably use it quite a bit. So the image size menu comes up and you can see that's a really good size image for putting into a game that could potentially go to print. I'll show you what it looks like at 96 dpi and you'll see why it's not very good. So this will be 96. Okay, so that's quite small, but you can already see how pixelated that is on my screen, and that's a 4K monitor. Imagine what that would look like on print. Not very good. So just undo that. As is, it's a nice image. We can use that. You can obviously up-res images, but they can become quite blurry and not very sharp, so I don't recommend it. And then you can just drag and drop that picture into the game. So you can draw it or you can just drop it in. So I'm going to keep that within the bounding box. So this is one of the things I learned from designing the game, is to keep it within the bounding box because I had to bring everything in when I was doing it for print. So I'm just going to resize that. It's looking okay now, but it's kind of going over the text. So there's a really simple way to fix that. So we want to do a text wrap, and it's these little buttons here, the little boxes with lines in them, and it's wrap around bounding box. Okay, so the text is now wrapping around that picture, but it is right up against it. So you want to go to Window, Text Wrap, and just chuck a bit of a margin on it. You know, use your gut, see how you feel about it. How do you feel it looks? And look at that. That is a really nice image. Now, you might want to have a look at what it's looking like if it was a PDF while you're designing it. So we can actually go across to this little button here. It says normal right now, but we can go into preview mode. Hey, look at that. That is looking really snazzy. Looks really nice. And that's very clean with those borders because there's a text wrap there. It's not butting up against that image. So we can go back into normal mode. The next thing I will show you how to do, because it does come up quite a bit in Call of Cthulhu, is the beloved text box. So I'm actually just going to move this box up a bit. You can actually draw shapes. So I'm just going to draw a rectangle tool. Okay, we don't probably want a black text box because that will be very print heavy, but we might do a paper white one, or we can do a brown one that's looking a little bit gross. We can also change the opacity of that, so you could get some of that texture coming through. And you could also put a border on that with this little button here, yeah? We don't want that, so we want a more of a black border. So you've got your text box there, and then all you have to do, you can actually just draw another text box on top of that. So you can put your important information there. You can format it like here using the heading styles and paragraph styles that you have. So we have done images, we have done a bit of layout, we've done the paragraph styles, we've done text boxes. These are pretty much all the basics you need to actually design a Call of Cthulhu game in InDesign. But there is one important thing that we haven't done just yet, and that is actually exporting it. And there's a bit to do with the export, so that's important. I'll go through that now. So you've got everything here. You've finished your layout. You've done a proofread. You checked it twice. And you can go File, Export. This is my Cthulhu test design. I'm going to replace that. Okay, so you can start off with high quality print, right? Because that's a good place to start. Even if you're prepping it for web upload, just start with a high quality print and work backwards from here. One of the things that you might want to do is include hyperlinks. So I include hyperlinks in my document. There's obviously Chaosium right there, you can see. If you don't check that, you'll get a PDF that isn't hyperlinked. So it's really important that you check that if you have hyperlinks in the document. The other things that you want to do is you want to look at compression. So one of the requirements for DriveThruRPG uploads is that they're 150 pixels per inch. But as I was saying, if you design for print first, it's very easy to downres the image. You can't make it get bigger. Marks and bleeds, you don't need any of these for a digital output. And these are all you don't need to worry about. Let's export it. Overset text. So that means that, say, one of your little plus signs, you've still got text on one of the other kind of working pages, right? For the purposes of this, we'll just say yes. But if you do get this message, it's probably worth going back and checking that you haven't got text that's kind of flowed over or kind of cut off on any of your pages. So I'm going to open up my Cthulhu test design in Acrobat to finish the final export for DriveThruRPG. So this is cool. We've got a cover, we've got a couple of pages. It looks like a proper game. How exciting. So we're going to go into File, Properties, and we need to set the name. This is important for metadata. So you go the Hammersmith Haunting Author Cat Clay, that's me, and keywords ghosts, Call of Cthulhu. Okay, that's fine. I'm going to save that. Press the big old save button. And then the next thing you are going to do is optimize the PDF. Now, this is one of the other requirements of One Bookshelf. So you want to go to Save as Other. So File, Save as Other, Optimize PDF. And this reduces the size. And it might only reduce it a little bit because we already exported it with 150 ppi for images. You want to just check, like, if you've used fancy fonts, it's probably good to keep them embedded. Check the transparency is off. You don't want transparency, and the rest of them, that's fine. Just trust Adobe to do what it does. So press OK. And I'm just going to save it here and save it as optimized. And then it's reduced the PDF file size. And that's all that does, but it actually just makes it, less of a server load on the website, but also for the people who download it. There you have it.
So at the end of all of this, you might be sitting there feeling overwhelmed by the thought of designing your work. The trick is, you're not alone. You should definitely ask for help in the Miskatonic repository Creator Circle group on Facebook. There's a lot of creators who are willing to help others. There's a bunch of great Discord groups as well. And if you've got the money to do so, hiring a graphic designer to do the cover and page layout is a great idea. It might save you a lot of stress in the long run if this feels like a daunting process. Whatever your skill level, I hope this tutorial has helped you design your Call of Cthulhu game in InDesign. If it's helped you, I would love to see what you've created. Likewise, if you have any questions, please hit me up in the comments below. I'd love to chat to you about your games and what you're making. I'm Kat Clay. I'm a Melbourne-based crime horror writer. I love games, reviewing games, talking about nerd stuff, doing cosplays. If you like that stuff too, please do hit subscribe, and thanks for watching.